Thank you very much. So I am Yves Choueifaty. I'm the founder of a company called TOBAM. I am a mathematician by background. And TOBAM is an asset management company based in Paris, New York, and Dublin. We entered the field of Bitcoin in 2013. At that time, we were looking at it as a mathematical tool, as a mathematical gadget. And it's only in 2016 that we took a very strong bet when we thought that one day or another, the largest asset managers in the world would launch funds based on Bitcoin. So in 2016, we entered really the field, and we launched the first open-ended fund invested in Bitcoin in the world. The goal of TOBAM is unique. It's to offer exposures not yet offered by others, not yet offered by the reference players. So whenever I talk about Bitcoin, I always start with a warning. The bad news I have about Bitcoin, it is that Bitcoin is extremely risky. It's very important to have that in mind. Bitcoin is a very, very, very risky asset. The good news that mitigates that, it is that investing is about risk-taking. I think it's very important to realize that Bitcoin is for everybody. Whenever you are an investor, you should have Bitcoins, even if you're afraid of risk. Why? Because risk, in fact, is a question of size. In fact, investing $50,000 in Bitcoin is much, much less risky than buying $3 million of S&P. So Bitcoin should be in every single portfolio, and depending on your risk aversion, you will have more or less Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is for every single portfolio. We are going to talk about Bitcoin, but I would like to provide you with my definition of Bitcoin. Very often when we are asked to introduce Bitcoin, we talk about crypto, we talk about blockchain, and I believe this is wrong. If I wanted to tell you what is a car, I would not describe to you the laws of thermodynamics. There are no cars without the laws of thermodynamics, but if I wanted to define what is a car, I would tell you a car is a box with 4 wheels, a 5th wheel, an accelerator, a brake, a tank, and an engine, and you would have understood that what I am describing to you never existed before car existed. It is the same for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is exactly the simplest financial asset in the world. You need to understand 5 concepts to understand Bitcoin. The 3 first concepts are common to the dollar and the Bitcoin. The 2 others make Bitcoin specific and make it different from the dollar and from the euro. The first word you need to know is the word digital. Bitcoin is digital the same way as the dollar is digital. The second word is Bitcoin is solid. It's difficult to forge, the same way that the dollar is difficult to forge. The third word is Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. I can give you a $100 banknote. I can give you a few satoshis without intermediaries. What really makes the Bitcoin different from any other currency that preceded it are the 2 next characteristics. The fact that its governance is decentralized, and this is the main difference between the euro and the Bitcoin. The governance of the euro is centralized, and the governance of the euro will always issue new in-laws and will cheat when compared to the initial intention of the euro. The last proposal of the Bitcoin, it is that, as you know well, there is 21 million of it. And I think that those 5 words, as soon as they will get understood, they will be understood by the rest of the world, will make history change completely. What we need to convey is the simplicity of what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is not something which is complex. You don't need to understand the blockchain. You don't need to understand cryptology in order to understand what is the unique value proposal of Bitcoin. I'm going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to talk to remind you about the conventional ways to build an exposure to Bitcoin. And I'm going to give you what I believe could be better ways to get an exposure to Bitcoin. The most conventional way to get an exposure to Bitcoin is to buy Bitcoins. As I told you at TOBAM, you have in front of you here the longest track record of the world of an open-ended fund invested in Bitcoin. It's a fund that we have launched in November 2017. And you can see on the bottom, I don't know whether you can see it here, that the correlation we used to offer until May 2025 to Bitcoin was 0.999. But in the beginning of May 2025, something catastrophic happened to us. And since then, we offer an excess return of 1,100% to Bitcoin, of course, non-annualized. So since May 2025, our fund that used to be passive became an enhanced fund. And now we are outperforming Bitcoin, but by 1,100% in 1 month. So what happened to us? So as I told you, the conventional way to offer exposure to Bitcoin was to be passive in Bitcoin. The second conventional way to offer an exposure to Bitcoin is something that we realized in 2020, when we realized that when most of the stocks of the MSCI ACWI offered a non-significant correlation to Bitcoin, there was a very small population of stocks that since 2020 offer some significant correlation to Bitcoin. So we organized that into a fund, and those are the performances of our fund. It was a mandate in the beginning, and then it became a fund. And you see that we offered, since 2019, since December 2019, it's an extremely high performance when compared to global equities. We were not the only one to do that. At that time, it was very trendy to offer blockchain funds. Why? Because Bitcoin was a very rude language, and everybody, instead of offering Bitcoin funds, started to offer blockchain funds. At TOBAM, we knew, or we had this thesis, that there is not much value in blockchain outside of Bitcoin. And since the beginning, we focused completely on Bitcoin. And this is what explained the huge difference of performance between the TOBAM fund and the others that I will not name. I can name them: Rothschild, iShares, Invesco, and the others. The secret of this huge outperformance resides in the fact that since the beginning, we are Bitcoin only at TOBAM. So those are, in my mind, the two conventional ways to get an exposure to Bitcoin. Let's talk now about what we believe at TOBAM is a better way to get an exposure to Bitcoin. We started investing in Bitcoin, in MicroStrategy in 2020. And we really wrote an article that we did not publish. We published the article much more recently. And we were extremely happy, of course, as you can imagine, with the huge performance of the stock. And to give you an idea, in the last 5 years, when Bitcoin went up 10x, MicroStrategy went up 31x. So you cannot be but happy with that. What happened later on was very interesting. It is what we call at TOBAM the rise of urban legends. People became scared about this huge performance, and plenty of people said MicroStrategy is simply about leverage. And this is a completely urban legend. And if you look at the website of MicroStrategy, you will see that MicroStrategy carries only $8 billion of debt, when its market cap is $120 billion. So the huge difference of performance cannot be explained by leverage. There is almost no leverage in MicroStrategy. In fact, you will find the answer to the difference of performance in the website of MicroStrategy into what they call the Bitcoin yield. In 2024, MicroStrategy increased its number of Bitcoin per share by 74%. This year, year to date, they have increased, it's not 17 anymore, it's 19% as of today. They announce, every Monday they announce their new Bitcoin yield. And since the beginning of 2025, MicroStrategy has increased the number of Bitcoin per share by 19%. There is a quotation of Michael Saylor that I like to repeat. There is only one thing which is better than Bitcoin. It's more Bitcoins. And this is what they are achieving. I told you that we have written one article. In fact, we have written 3 scientific articles, 3 scientific papers. So I invite you to scan the QR code and to download the article. So we have written 3 articles across the last 4 years. We have published only one of them in order to answer to those urban legends. The first article consists into very simply deciphering the performance of MicroStrategy in order to really explain very precisely where the performance of MicroStrategy comes from. It is something that is incredibly exact. When Bitcoin goes up 200% and MicroStrategy goes up 600%, you can decompose the 600% very exactly into 3 factors. And the likelihood for those factors to be systematically positive and always growing is something which is extremely interesting and extremely mathematical. So I think it's very important for all of us to understand what are the engines behind MicroStrategy. So we have started monitoring 60 stocks at TOBAM of the kind of MicroStrategy in order to analyze which one will take advantage the most of those phenomena. You see here this ridiculous orange line. The ridiculous orange line that you have here is Bitcoin, which is up only 300% in 2 years. In the meantime, MicroStrategy has delivered 13x, and MetaPlanet has delivered 40x. And this is completely explained by our formula. Our formula explains it also. How come emerging BTC companies will have an advantage? And it will explain very precisely how come when Bitcoin goes up 60%, MicroStrategy goes up 150%, MetaPlanet 15x, and the blockchain group 39x. And this is, again, completely explained by the formula that you could have downloaded if you scanned the QR code. So we arranged that into a fund. And our aim, as I told you at TOBAM, our job does not consist into providing you with what BlackRock provides you with. We have done what BlackRock has done with IBIT. We did it 8 years ago. Our job is to provide you with what BlackRock is not yet providing you with. So the idea is not to reside here anymore, but is to go on this side. This is the usual way to represent risk and return. We are not aiming at being here. We are aiming at being here and being here and proposing alternate portfolios. Those portfolios have been organized into mandates, and we have been able to organize them into mutual funds most recently. And this is what we have delivered. You see here, this was our original fund. It was completely passive until the end of April of this year. And since the end of April of this year, Bitcoin has delivered 24%. Our fund had a performance of 131%. This is this fund here. But we have also launched this one here. And this one here was launched on the 7th of May of this year. And it has delivered 305% in 1 month and 1 week. Those funds are not hedge funds. There is no leverage. There is no derivatives. It's daily NAVs. It's daily liquidity. It consists into only mixing a certain proportion of Bitcoins with a certain proportion of Bitcoin treasury companies. I don't know how much time I've left. I don't see that on the screen. 2 minutes left. So let me give you the conclusion. I really believe that the business model of MicroStrategy is more than 300 years old. Let me tell you the story of companies that had exactly the same business as MicroStrategy 300 years ago. One of them was founded in the UK in 1684, and one of them was founded in France in 1800. And their job consisted very simply into increasing their capital in order to amass more and more gold. The name of the first one is Bank of England. The name of the other one is Banque de France. So the business model of MicroStrategy is a very old business model. I started buying Bitcoin in 2013, and about 7 years ago, 7 years later, I read a book by Friedrich Hayek, a Nobel Prize of Economy, and the book title was Denationalization of Money. And every page I was turning, I was saying, shit, this guy is writing about Bitcoin. In 1975, Friedrich Hayek described very precisely Bitcoin. And much later, I realized that another version of the book, published in French in 2025, very interestingly changed the title of the book from Denationalization of Money to For a True Competition Across Currencies. And I am really now under the belief that the future of currency is not Bitcoins. The next currency is not Bitcoin. The next standard of value is Bitcoin, but the next currencies are going to be the tokens issued by those who own the Bitcoin in order to facilitate exchanges. I have here the previous token, one of the previous tokens. This is a token issued by the ECB against its reserve in standard, which they don't have. I am really under the belief that some science fiction book has been written in 1975. This is the book, and describes a world in which some corporations that are privately owned will amass more and more of standard of value and issue the token in order to facilitate exchanges. I think I was too long, so thank you very much.
Secure your BTC Prague 2026 ticket at the lowest possible price now.